2.
Hi, I'm Pamela Davis, and I'm welcoming you again to the Reincarnation Chronicle. Remember, I am an investigative transformationalist, meaning that I'm delving into life's great questions, and reincarnation is certainly one of them. I'm glad that you've joined me here today to continue on our exploration. And speaking of exploration, it reminds me of space, outer space. And not long ago, I was watching a film I enjoy very much, Armageddon, with Bruce Willis, Ben Affleck. Really a good movie. And I was struck by the fact that when they're going to save the world from the asteroid coming to blow it all up, on their spacesuit they wear a patch that says, "For all mankind." Now, I don't know if this is typically a NASA motto or if they just put that in there for the film, but anyway, it's an important thought for all mankind, because if you remember what we talked about recently and about our origin in the angelic realm and what we're doing for essentially the entire created cosmic order, we're doing this not only for all mankind, we're living not only for all mankind, but for all of creation. And so, what is our ultimate destiny, our ultimate goal in doing this? Essentially, you could say that it's to become, each one of us, to become one of the shining ones. And what does that mean? That means that we have come to a place in our evolution through a long period of effort and adventure and trial and error and all kinds of, every kind of experience you can imagine. We come to a place where our heart and our consciousness is so expanded that it becomes enlarged. We become enlarged to the point where we can encompass and embrace all of the world and all of the creatures in it without judgment and with complete compassion. If you think about it, this is no small task. How do we do that? How does one person do that? How long does it take, and what is required? Well, obviously, it's enormous. I'm always amused when I meet people who say, and usually with tremendous conviction, "Oh yes, this is my last lifetime." And they'll say that, "Oh, I've had, well, how many have you had so far? 7 or 12 or whatever it is their teacher, of the moment has told them." And they always cite some guru who's told them that, yes, you're a very advanced being and this is your last lifetime. And so this is not to be believed. And if somebody tells you this, if I were you, I'd turn tail and run the other direction, because the motives in this kind of manipulation are not necessarily very good. What could be the case, and legitimately so, could be that the teacher has picked up that this may be the last lifetime in a particular cycle, but that would be a cycle in a very, very long and larger process or cycle. Typically, all of us live thousands of lives. And it's easy to understand why we would need to live thousands of lives. If we're to become completely self-realized, that is, with the heart and consciousness expanded to embrace all the world and all the creatures in it, how could we do this in the span of not only one short lifetime, but maybe just, a few? It's just not possible when you consider the limitations of history and situation, world conditions, social conditions, and an infinite number of variables. There's only so much that we can experience in one lifetime, given a limited longevity, given our limitations of space and time. Even the most intrepid traveler, how far can he or she travel in one lifetime? What is it they can actually experience in depth? And think about it, it's really limited, not that much. And for most people, they don't have too many opportunities to experience a great breadth of conditions and circumstances around the world. So to be able to get the most out of wherever they are is their task at hand at the moment. But then to be able to have greater understanding, they're going to have to look to other lifetimes and the opportunities that are offered in so many other ways. Racial opportunities, and this is huge. You know, your experience as a Chinese peasant, for example, could not possibly be very similar to some kind of Middle Eastern potentate, or a politician in Canada, or a gaucho on the pampas of Argentina. You know, I mean, imagine the tremendous variety of experience just in those situations I named. So we have to look at this as a tremendously long trajectory, a long trajectory where we have opportunities both as men and as women. However, it seems from what I've gathered that it seems to run in streaks, that if you're a woman now, it could be that you have chosen to be a woman maybe a little bit more than a man, but you've undoubtedly had lives as both. The lifetimes that I remember are primarily lifetimes as a woman. However, I also remember lifetimes as a man under different circumstances and in vastly different historical time periods. So we have to consider, what do we have to gain? What are the benefits of living in, say, 3000 BC in Egypt, and then perhaps in one of the early dynasties of China, or as a Native American coming across the Bering, well, maybe an Asian coming across the Bering Straits into North America with descendants who will eventually become Native Americans, or a Norse Viking traveling from Greenland and eventually hitting the northern shores of what is now the United States. Tremendous variety. It just boggles the mind once you think about it. So you have to enlarge your vista. You have to enlarge your concept of time and where we're going. And understand that what is it that brings us into these lifetimes. Now, for example, there are family groups, and according to the therapists who are doing a lot of hypnotic regression, there are family groups where we encounter the same individuals over and over and over again, but in different roles and in different guises. For example, the person that you came to as a child, who's now your mother, could have been your daughter or your sister or your cousin in another life, could have been your uncle, because the genders will switch back and forth. Someone who is now your brother could have been your father, and the children that you now have could, in a later lifetime, become parents, or perhaps were parents before. So we tend to come back to the same groups, which can be, can be constituted by hundreds and hundreds of individuals, but at different times and in different ways. And this is for us to have the practice of learning how to get along with just about everybody and all of their stuff, the stuff that they bring with them and the stuff that we bring with us. But there are also other considerations. Suppose that that you are like Mozart or John Williams or someone like this, with a tremendous ability in the area of musical composition. Well, there are two ways that this can work out before you get into this life. You can either, and remember, we're talking about choice because we do the choosing. You can choose a family where they are perhaps very musically inclined, maybe professional musicians or patrons of the arts, or a mother who's a music teacher, or somebody in that family who will recognize your ability and be able to guide you and nurture that ability or skill from the time you're very young, so that you really do get a head start. Or it could work another way. Let's say that you have been many times a musical genius, and in developing that area of your soul and your innate gifts, you neglect others. You neglect perhaps a family life, or you neglect an intellectual life, or other kind of social relationships or social responsibilities, something that is getting the short end of the stick while you're completely involved in your music. So you could choose to be born into a family in the middle of a rural area where there isn't a musical instrument for miles, or you're in a family where their emphasis is on getting the seeds sown and the crops gathered in, or in an industrial area where people are just desperately seeking survival in very adverse circumstances, and that's what you have to cope with, and you don't have the ability in this life to pursue the music that's part of your soul, because you have to develop other areas. Perhaps getting involved in a neighborhood where people really need compassion and they need care, that you can develop in developing your heart center. So there's this kind of thing. Now also, suppose that you have come into, you've had a lifetime, and we've all had lifetimes as individuals that we wouldn't, if we could remember them, and this is part of the reason we often don't remember, if we could remember some of the really crummy lifetimes we've lived as people that we wouldn't admire and certainly wouldn't want anything to do with. Perhaps we've had lifetimes where we have been cruel to others, where we've been merciless in war, or we've had serfs or slaves that we mistreated, or we were killer mercenaries. Now, first of all, why would we do that in the first place? Well, we're not going to be able to understand evil in this world or any other unless we have had lifetimes where we're really deeply engrossed in it and immersed and functioning under the requisites of regimes and value systems that are less than savory. But in order to understand that, we have to have been part of it. You can't really understand as a spectator. You have to be in it and get through it, and know also that in a future lifetime you'll have an opportunity to compensate or make up for the wrongdoing that you did in those circumstances. So that could be another limitation or another opportunity, depending on how you want to look at it. So you could be born, for example, as someone who is disadvantaged, someone who is the object of cruelty, or someone born without an arm. Maybe in war you cut off somebody's arm in battle, and you're born the next time for some, with a birth defect, and you come in without an arm. You'll know what it's like to live without an arm. So there are other circumstances too that we're going to look at. We're going to come back in this, the mechanics of reincarnation in part 2. We'll be back in just a moment.